While the scope and scale of Star Wars are vast and grand, centering around characters with mystical powers who will shape the future of the entire galaxy, I am often more enamored with stories of ordinary people, individuals who aren't so much changing the world as being changed by the world and finding their place in it. That's why stories like Rogue One, Andor, and Republic Commando have resonated so much with me. They take us down to a street level view, showing us how the Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War influenced and were influenced by people who never swung a lightsaber, and maybe even never saw one. When you are given a look inside the head of one of these characters, you realize that often they aren't so much fighting for their cause or ideals, but for their friends, their family, their brothers. Being willing to die for the man beside you is one of the greatest virtues one can have. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So you can see why I've titled this video the way I did. Yes, the Siege of Mandalore is epic, emotionally powerful, and an incredibly satisfying ending to Clone Wars. But the personal sacrifice and dedication to his brothers that Fives displays in the first arc of Season 6 just tugs at my heartstrings in a way that no other arc did. Obviously, this is very much a personal opinion. Please let me know your favorite arc down below. But I can't help but think that this was Clone Wars at its finest, as Fives' tragic arc served as an incredible payoff for both his own character development and one of the show's central themes. Throughout Clone Wars, we see the Republic's troops struggle to understand their purpose and their very identities. Despite being genetically uniform, the clones, or at least the ones that have speaking roles, are all markedly different in personality and temperament, and they display their individuality through tattoos, armor paint jobs, and even hair dye in Rex's case. Most importantly, they give each other names, confirming to themselves and to their Jedi commanders that they are thinking, feeling individuals whose loyalty and affection need to be earned. They are not, as they often point out, droids that mindlessly obey their programming. Being created in a lab does not lessen their worth, whatever General Krell would have them believe. Fives is one of the most outspoken clones regarding this ideal. This is shown in the episode earliest in his timeline, when he insists on his squadmate calling him Fives.
The name is Fives!
And his attitude in this matter strengthens considerably as the war progresses. The battle on Umbara serves to show us Fives' wholehearted dedication to his belief, that he is willing to die for doing what is right. The men being mowed down around him are largely unknown to the audience, but they are Fives' brothers, and he is willing to risk court-martial and execution if it means fewer of them have to die. His unrelenting desire to obtain autonomy for himself and his fellow clones defines Fives' story arc and ultimately leads to his untimely, tragic end. After Tup's apparent betrayal, Fives takes it upon himself to discover what happened. While the Jedi and Kaminoans are each trying to solve a problem with the defective clone, Fives is investigating what truly happened to his brother. In doing so, he discovers not only the dark secret of the inhibitor chip, but also his own personal nightmare. The clones are injected with a mechanism designed to overpower their free will, to make them automatons who will unquestioningly follow orders, or I should say, one specific order. The reality of the inhibitor chip is the antithesis of Fives' defining beliefs. Of all the clones we've met, he has been the most vocal about their individuality, so it's only appropriate that he is the trooper to take up this fight. The tragedy of it is that we know Fives cannot win. He cannot stop Order 66. On the grand scale, the audience knows that Fives' attempts to reveal Palpatine's plot will fail. As a result, the show can't generate much tension in that regard. However, things are quite a bit different when we zoom in on the character level. Yes, we know that ultimately the clones will turn on the Jedi, but we don't know which clones will, or which of them will survive the inevitable clash with their Jedi commanders. Fives' discovery of the inhibitor chip gives the audience hope that not all is lost, that some of the troopers we have come to know and love throughout the series will manage to escape, possibly allowing more Jedi to survive the Purge. It's a beautiful example of how to create tension in a story where your audience already knows the general ending. First, create characters with meaningful personalities and arcs that the audience will grow attached to. Second, show that the fate of these characters is not necessarily tied directly to the overall plot. Third, watch dumb YouTube channels gush over your story years after the fact. We care. We are invested in stories about people. The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. If you read a book about the Battle of the Bulge and how the Germans took the thinly spread out Americans by surprise and very nearly won a victory that would have been catastrophic for the Allied advance, you might be interested. But if I show you a story of one medic's attempts to improve and save the lives of the men in those foxholes in Belgium, and his witness of the wounds, death, and destruction that the battle inflicts upon both soldier and civilian, you might just cry. We all know how World War II ended, and yet the account of Easy Company as told in Band of Brothers provides some of the most gripping storytelling ever put on a screen, because it puts us in the boots of the paratroopers, wondering whether the next shell has our name on it. To write an effective tragedy, you have to give the audience hope in the presence of such danger. Fives' investigation and journey on Camino and Coruscant delivers hope by placing a beloved character in a situation that we can see a way out of. The audience can picture a happy ending, an escape, a realization of the individuality and freedom that Fives so clearly treasures. Sadly, that hope is not fulfilled, but the show wisely does not dash it in a single shocking moment. Instead, we watch it slowly crumble. This starts when Nala Se drugs Fives, demonstrating how the deck is simply stacked against the trooper. Fives is then manipulated by Palpatine into attacking the Chancellor, eroding both the trust of the Jedi in Fives and our own hopes for his survival. But it's not all downhill. The show blows oxygen on the dying embers of our hope, as Fives manages to get word to Rex and Anakin, but then suffocates that flame as we watch the ARC Trooper trap his friends, not trusting in their goodwill. His brain addled by the Kaminoan drugs, Fives is unable to clearly or calmly articulate his findings, the danger, and the plot. His drug-induced ravings are that of a man broken by years of combat stress and the loss of his best friend. It is heart-wrenching to watch Rex and Anakin not believe Fives' story, but we can hardly blame them. They only see a deathly sick friend in need of their help. None of our heroes did anything wrong here, and that fact only adds to the tragedy. Fives' death is then dealt by the hand of a trooper who did not want to shoot him, but doubtless was under orders to do so if necessary. He was, like the rest of the clones, doing his duty.
I only wanted to do my duty,
Fives tells Rex just seconds before he dies. Years of experience and growth evolved Fives' sense of duty. It was no longer a strict adherence to the orders of his superiors, but rather an obligation to protect his brothers from all enemies. And yet, it was that very sense of higher duty that led to his demise. Had he been a good trooper, followed orders, and soldiered on, he would have survived. Doing the right thing was not only far more difficult than the alternative, it also came at a far greater personal cost. Despite doing everything right, Fives simply could not overcome the overwhelming odds of a plot that was created long before he ever held a blaster. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life. Life is tragic, but even tragedy is not without meaning or purpose. We can learn from it. We can be inspired by those whose stories end in tragedy, who poured their heart and soul into their mission, even if it was doomed from the start. Because what is the alternative? Doing nothing? Giving up? No, not an option. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The tragedy of Fives is the most impactful arc of the series because it zooms in on a microcosm of both the hidden struggle between the Republic and Palpatine and the clones' search for meaning and personhood. More than any other arc, it makes the wars a personal battle. It takes a character we have come to know and love and puts him through the emotional wringer, weaving hope and despair into a beautiful, tragic tapestry, yet told in a manner that kids can follow and understand. It's a textbook example of how to do a kids show well. Keep the dialogue simple and straightforward, and let the characters exposit a bit, but inject mature and complex themes that adults will have to digest for a few minutes before hitting next episode.
the mission, the nightmares, finally over.
I can't help but feel that this moment was inspired by the death of Maximus in Gladiator, a story about a soldier who lost those closest to him, who took on the most powerful man in the world, and whose hopes for freedom and victory were dashed by powers beyond his ken. One of the few movies that will make me cry every time, by the way.
He was a soldier of Rome.
Yep, that'll do it. And man, at least Maximus got to kill Commodus. Fives' death, though, is not all for naught. His final conversation with Rex causes the commander, to be freed of his chip shortly after Order 66 hits.
But I owe it to Fives to record what I saw.
Fives died, and thus his brother lived. I am so happy that the final season gave us this payoff. What do you think? Were you as impacted by this arc as I was? Of course you were, you're not heartless. Whatever you think, let me know. Tell me your favorite Clone Trooper, Clone Wars arc, or Buffalo Wild Wings sauce flavor. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.